Hello, everyone.
Hi, all together.
Hi all.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Right.
Hello.
So this is just going to be a chat. There's no presentation or anything like that. Mark is here, and I'll ask Mark to make some opening remark. I invited Mark to come on because of all the recent news, and that means things that he would love to talk about, things he can't talk about. But I think he's also got some other things to say. He's also got a lot of anecdotes and background, and he's very interested to talk about Olympus innovations. He's a bit of a historian on Olympus innovations. And of course, Mark was instrumental in setting up of our site.
Wet this afternoon, so it's quite good timing. We can do this again in a month's time. I'm quite happy to do that. For today, it's really about reassurance and a chance for you to ask a few questions. We haven't done this before anyway. I know we've had other people on, but it's not something we've made a habit of. And all the guys have been doing lots and lots of sessions with everybody, but this is really more open-ended. I can't tell you anything more strictly than was officially announced. It was quite a dry press release, and I think that's a business thing. They have to tell the stock exchange when something's going on, and they can't always be particularly, how should we put it, marketing and flowery about it. But what I can do is, you know, if you ask away, I can tell you what I can tell you, I can tell you what I can't. I'm more than happy to talk about what I do know is coming, and to reassure you that as far as we're concerned, it is business as usual. There's bound to be some changes, but companies do this all the time. So let's see. And I think I said in one conversation, no one can guarantee that the business is going to be here in 100 years' time, and that would be the same for any business. But what we can say is the plans are to keep it all going.
Mark Johnson has put something onto.
I saw that.
So I'll hand over to Mark. Is one of our stalwarts. So I'll say to Mark, why don't you kick things off then?
Well, I mean, we can, with the questions pretty clear. That's one of the ones that we have to be a little careful about because it gets into the speculation territory. And whilst we can speculate till the cows come home, the only thing that is a logical answer to it is that they wouldn't be buying a business if they didn't think they could make a go of it. So that would have to include that part of the business as well. But that's, at the moment, speculation, partly because they have to go through the due diligence process over the next 3 months. And until they've done that, then we're not going to get any more details. So yeah, I just have to be a little bit careful about speculating. Easy to do, but gets you into trouble.
Okay. So next we've got Jeremy.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Mark. This isn't particularly a question, it's just something to reassure you that we're all friendly faces here.
Of course.
And it's actually to say, I believe a lot of us will have met you at one of the NEC shows.
Probably.
And we enjoyed meeting you then, and we're enjoying meeting you now.
Thank you very much. And I'm here to reassure you because obviously no one likes to hear this kind of news because it's unsettling. But it doesn't mean the products are bad. It doesn't mean they've suddenly become obsolete overnight. And although the two things were not linked, it's fairly obvious the timing of the roadmap is a good thing to do with the lenses because it shows you there's a little bit more coming. And we know there's more beyond that. So it's just a little bit of an uncertain period whilst we go through that. But bear with us.
Okay, so moving on. I'm sure we'll come back to Jeremy because he's always full of questions. Barry, do you want to say hello, or do you? I'm sure Mark's already seen your greeting, but you're very welcome to say something.
Yeah, I'd just like to say hi, Mark.
Hi, Barry. Good to see you.
Here's Anne behind me.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Anne.
Sorry.
No, carry on. Any questions?
No, sure. We're still pressing the buttons.
Ah, good. I mean, that's the main thing, is carry on doing it. And I had a long conversation with, God knows, I've talked to so many people this week, but the system is still pretty unique. So if you think that, and one of the things that I was chatting to Nigel Atherton about, because he was feeling a little guilty after his BBC thing, was, and he, you know, he said he talked for 20 minutes, and of course they pull out the worst bits, and headlines don't attract people if they're dull, do they? So we have to deal with the clickbait. I mean, nothing's changed. Headlines in newspapers were always like that, but it seems to be worse on the internet. But he said, oh, you know, that I didn't mean it to come across like that. That's the trouble with doing interviews, so that's why I have to be a bit careful. But the story behind the system hasn't changed. If it wasn't there, there'd be a big gap in the market, because people are, and you've been with the system a long time, so you know, but there are high-profile people starting to pick it up because they genuinely believe in it. And it's simply, again, it's held into speculation, but because the company has changed over the years, perhaps it needs a slightly different approach. And so we're looking at it as a positive, because it's getting a smaller and smaller part of a big corporation. So perhaps this will be a good thing.
Oh, okay. I don't know whose dog that is, but if you have a dog,
that's my dog.
Oh, it's your dog.
Because every time a delivery man comes, he barks.
Because he was talking at the time.
Okay, Mark, we'll let you off. Right now, Paul Graber, who everyone knows because he's presented previously on our sessions, and is a bit of an authority, would like to ask a question. I think that I'll hand over to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Mark, thank you for doing this. Much appreciated. I bought an EM1X to add to my EM1 Mark II specifically for bird photography, and acting on a strong rumour that the AI was going to come to it.
Yeah.
I'm delighted that it is, but is it really going to be another 8 months or so? And I'm saying this given the news that Canon are launching a camera next week, which claims it is going to have bird AI as part of its portfolio.
Yeah. I don't know is the short answer. I think firmware takes a lot longer than you might think. And I remember sitting in a meeting where they said, you might like to know there's 800,000 lines of code in the average camera. And when you move one of them around, it doesn't necessarily make things work straight away. So they tend to be a little bit conservative when it comes to things like that. I think they've talked about this, they've talked about other things, and the M1X has that because it's got the 2 processors and a lot of memory. There's a lot of room to do things like this, and I think that's one of the things they'd like to be able to do. But I mean, let's see. Hopefully it'll be shorter time. Fingers crossed. And it doesn't alter the fact that you think about the system. I'm intrigued to see what Canon do, and there's been lots of rumors about lenses, but the system is still, the compact message, and the fact that the IS is so much better hasn't changed.
Sure.
So I think it's still a good bet. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
All right.
I suppose a question that I'd like to ask actually, which is on the subject, is what is the expected arrival time of the bird AI feature?
Don't know.
Oh, there isn't one. Okay.
No, because it's pretty unusual for them to trail it. Normally in the past, firmware's been pretty close to their chests, and then it's announced and available immediately. So it's a bit of a first to say it's coming, but that does tend to suggest that they're very confident about it, because they hate saying that things are coming if there's any chance that it's not going to work. So it seems to me they're dotting the I's, I hope.
The announcement said this winter, which of course could be anything from November to February, really.
Yes, true.
My understanding is that with machine learning, you have to feed the algorithm hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of pictures of birds to build the model up. And that's the bit which can be time consuming. Okay, so let's hope it'll be sooner rather than later. There have been some questions about why this can't be done on the Mark III. Obviously, it doesn't have the dual processor. But then somebody else did actually ask a question. I don't think he can be here today. He asked a question about could a limited version of that feature be made available to the Mark III. I don't think you can answer that, but it's an interesting.
Too right. No, that's classic.
I
That's
thought it was
classic
an
speculation.
Yeah, I
think
thought it was an interesting question, so I thought I'd mention it.
The 1 series is the one that has a bit more flexibility, because they're getting so packed full of things nowadays. It isn't always possible to put new firmware on everything with all the new features to every model. But it's a promise they've made about the 1 series, that it's the flagship model, so there should be that you should expect things to happen on there, but it would be complete speculation to say it would be possible.
Okay. So when you say 1 series, do you mean all ones or just the
EM1? Well, the EM1 series rather than the 5 series.
Yeah, I was referring to the EM1 Mark III actually.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
I noticed David Frost asked about what's the main market for Olympus, which is actually an interesting question, because it allows me to pull up a bit of trivia that I got from our Australian marketing team last year, which was that if maybe 1% of professionals make any money out of wildlife photography, and that tends to be running tours and things a lot more nowadays than actually making money out of images, but something like 25% of the high-end camera market is bought by amateurs doing wildlife because they need the performance and they have the money. So one of the reassuring things about where is the range going to go, or does it have a market, is 2 bits of information. One is the expectation, and this is always an expectation, but the market's going to stop being in free fall in the next couple of years. And it'll go back to how it was before digital, which is that it'll be just like it was in film camera days. Some people are doing it for fun, and some people are doing it very seriously as a hobby, and a few people are making a living out of it. And that'll be pretty stable. And within that, there are going to be different needs, just like there is in any other technology sector. And the whole idea of traveling with lightweight kit that does have the performance hasn't changed. So wildlife, yes, is a big part of it. Landscape's an interesting one, because that very much comes down to the individual. Some people want all-out resolution for landscape, and then they have to carry the kit around to do that. But increasingly, a lot of people are realizing they can do it with the smaller cameras. And if you're going to have to move around and go to places, then again, the size, the form factor is important.
So we had Steve Gosling on just a couple of weeks ago, and he demonstrated quite easily that landscape is not out of bounds for much for third.
Well, no, and he's an extreme case, because he was shooting on phase 1. I think he still has it. I don't know whether he still got it, but he used to say 1% of the time I'll take that out, which is £25,000, and but a lot of stuff to carry around. So yes, he's a very good example of what is, if you think about, is it supposed to be a pleasure to do? For most of you, it's a pleasure. It's not a chore. If you've got to sit at a football match in the dark and it's raining, then you might have a different set of priorities. But for most of us, the weight thing still, I go on about it, but it's still a big thing.
Okay.
What else have we got?
There is a quick mention about you personally, because I know you haven't been well.
Oh, that's John. John's like John. I've known for a long time, and yes, my hair is getting longer than yours, John. So I'm sorry about that. But no, I'm much better.
That's good, because it was coming and going, wasn't it? You were up and down a bit, and
I had some obscure syndrome to do with nerve endings. I put it down to stress myself.
Right. Okay, so I don't know, David, did you want to come back to Mark on anything?
No, I was interested in that. It seems to me that quite a large number of the forum members are interested in wildlife, and we get some very good wildlife, in fact in some cases some stunning wildlife photographs taken, particularly with the 300. And interestingly enough, the old 4/3 50 to 200 is still capable of performing on the newer bodies.
And actually, when you think about it, this is the big story that we had to change twice. And I was there when they didn't put autofocus onto the film cameras, and it was embarrassing at the time, because cameras like the 707, which I know was on f-stoppers yesterday, he was talking about it, wasn't very good, frankly. And perhaps they were. We never heard the commercial decision about why they didn't just license the AF technology. But if they had done, we'd probably never have this system. So the positives are that you now can take 300mm lens, which is effectively a 600, out, and it's not going to kill you to carry it around. And that may not have happened if they'd stuck to doing autofocus on film. They'd have been in full frame like everybody else. So there's got to be some positives. The thing they've got to work out is, and everyone's in the same boat on this, how do you make money out of a business? How do you make money out of a business which is so volatile?
Yes, and David's had to run off, but David is an example of one of several of our members who are very fortunate in being able to go on safari to Africa, and the ability to lug some pretty capable kit around without breaking your back is certainly a huge selling point. And we have lots of former full frame shooters now using Micro Four Thirds and who are perfectly happy. We do have one or two who I think are going through a lot of angst at the moment. Wondering, I don't know if Paul is Paul here today? I don't know whether he could make it, but Paul has been.
I'm here, Ian.
Oh, you are here. There, I couldn't see you. Paul is a good example. He's flip-flopped a bit. He's tried Nikon Z6. Wasn't very comfortable with it. Came back. He's been buying and selling brand new Olympus gear like it's going out of fashion. So you should give him some commission.
Yeah, I feel like I've become a dealer recently.
So actually, Paul, you've posted at length in great detail about your thoughts on your personal journey with Micro Four Thirds and Olympus, and I know that you're attracted to full frame for various perfectly legitimate reasons. And let's just say immediately that I think it's very wrong of any of us to poo-poo full frame. Full frame has its place. My personal view is that people often make the wrong decision to go full frame. Others make absolutely the right decision. But your own view. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yes, I'd be very happy to do that. I mean, so I guess a little bit of history, really. So I came to Olympus really at the time of the EM5. So I've been using Canon full frame gear for years, and I was just harking for something small to carry around. So I actually bought the EPL5, and it was a lovely little camera. And I was astonished to find that actually the image quality out of the little EPL5 was really no worse than the Canon 5D. So I went out and bought an EM5, and very quickly I found that the Canon stuff was just sitting in the cupboard, because not only was the EM5 giving technical results pretty much as good as the Canon, but it was so much more enjoyable to use. I found mirrorless in terms of controlling exposure and in terms of features on the camera, like the in-body image stabilization and the live view and the live time and live compositions. Well, it wasn't live composite at the time. Live time were absolutely great. And so I basically sold all my Canon gear and became very much an Olympus fanboy, I guess. And I still am today. I mostly do landscapes and stuff that doesn't move. So I'm not craving Uber AF or monster high frame rates. And the image quality out of the M1 is most of the time good enough. There are, you have to get your exposure pretty well right with Micro Four Thirds. You can't go pushing the raw files as much as you would with a larger sensor. But there's tricks and techniques. You can shoot a 5-stop bracketed sequence in almost no time with the EM1 with the 60 frames per second electronic shutter. It's less than half a second to take 5 frames. With the M1 Mark III, of course, they've gone further and lets me do handheld high res. So, and I really like the Olympus cameras. I like the feel of them. I like the performance of them. I like the features on them. The lens is absolutely fantastic. Anyone who tells you that you can get a full frame system with a lens ecosystem that's even close to the quality and range of Micro Four Thirds just hasn't gone looking. You know, you look at a lens like the 12 to 100. I mean, that is an astonishing lens. You know, it's a 24 to 200. Image quality at every focal length and every corner of the frame, every aperture is just stunning. The image stabilization with the camera can make up for, you know, probably 3, 4 stops of ISO with a full frame camera. So I really love the system. I desperately, though, want to get an upgraded sensor. I've been waiting for it for the last few years, and you know, if I had to criticize something on Olympus, I would say, you know, I'm sure they could have, perhaps in conjunction with the guys at Panasonic, have commissioned, you know, a next generation Micro Four Thirds sensor. The technology for a 30 megapixel backside illuminated sensor exists. You know, Sharp are bringing out an 8K movie-oriented Micro Four Thirds camera very soon, which they've been.
Is that actually going to happen? This one?
It seems like it might happen. Yeah. So you know, the thing which I sort of don't get is, you know, I don't understand why the Micro Four Thirds manufacturer community hasn't done more. You know, we've seen, you know, a fantastic, sensor performance in EM5, but the movements since then have been pretty incremental. Even the 20 megapixel sensor.
It's a big topic, that one. It used to be I mean, it always has been a topic, and in the bad days when the damn digital revolution, or what we call it, the resolution was changing every 6 months, but there were millions and millions of products being shipped and a lot of people producing parts for them. Yeah. And one of the sad stories I heard, which has a point to it regarding this, was that they wanted to continue with one of the compact cameras, one of the high-end compacts, but they couldn't, because as the market started to tail off, the screen manufacturers were switching to making screens for phones, and they just couldn't get the components. Mm. And I think what we're seeing now, because the market has been decreasing so rapidly, is that there is an element of you need a certain quantity to justify doing certain things. Of the development processes, and this is a good thing in terms of where we're at the moment, the lenses are the bits that take the longest and are the most intense, because they're the classic case of something which is easy to do the first 95%, and then the last 5% to get them working the way you all want them to work is very intense. And I think that the lineup of lenses is already very good, and the ones they've announced, we don't really need any more. We can always have more, but we don't need particularly more lenses after these ones. But the sensor, yes. The story behind who they work with, I think there's an element of if you switch to Panasonic, for example, it has some impacts in terms of the way the whole firmware works in the camera and the way it processes the image, which they're used to doing with the sensors they got at the moment. But I think that's the big unanswered question is when's that going to come? But again, let's be positive. I think it's about the right point for that to happen. So
yes, no, I agree. But I guess just to finish off in and to answer your question. So yes, I bought myself a Z6. It came with the 2470 kit lens, which for those of you who are not familiar with it, the Z6 is a teeny bit bigger than an EM1 Mark II or 3. It's a little bit heavier. The 2470 is an f4. It's a little bit bigger and heavier than the 12 to 40, but not by much. So you put the two cameras in your hand, and they're not usually dissimilar. It's clear that the Z6 is heavier. But what I would say is really two things, is that yes, the image quality is better. It's significantly better at high ISO, but that actually doesn't particularly bother me. Down at base ISO, if you don't go crazy pushing the files in post with, you know, exposure boosts and masks and shadow pushing and so on, then the difference in the actual final image is not a lot, actually, frighteningly little. And what I would say is that the Z6 as a camera is nowhere near as evolved as the EM1. In other words, the EM1, in terms of its speed, its features, its capabilities, just the way it works, it's clearly a camera that's been through 3 or 4 development iterations, and it feels it. Whereas the Z6 definitely feels like a camera that's Nikon's first bash, you know. I mean, it's not bad. I think they've done a good job, but, you know, just little things like if you do a long exposure on the Nikon, the screen just goes black. You've got no idea how long the exposure's been running. Don't even think about live time or live composite. You know, there's just nothing to help you. If you stick a manual lens on, you can feed in the focal length for it, but you can't feed in the name of the lens or the maximum aperture. It doesn't record any of it in the EXIF, so you know you've got no idea what lens you've used. You know, I could go on. It's just little things, you know, the speed of which it does.
I think you highlighted there, and this is one of the we're starting to do this. I mean, we do it every big camera launch. We tend to go back through the history of the innovations they've made. And I remember standing in Digital Depot at a weekend event about 1 million years ago. I think it was when we brought out the E510. And this chap came in, and he wasn't a serious photographer, but he had a fairly old Canon film camera and 2 lenses, classic short zoom and a tele zoom. And I said, for the same price as the 2 lenses you've got, you can have an E510 twin lens kit, half the size, nice, easy to use product. And he was complete, and this was, you know, when dust reduction had been around for a while then, but he just wouldn't have it. And I think that some of those things have got lost. And we were at SWPP with the dust reduction conversation. Some guy even said, I'm gonna buy 2 bodies and I won't have to worry about it. And if you go on from dust reduction to particularly stabilization, but also, like you say, live composite, those kind of features are all stuff that no one else has been doing. So they've had a lot of innovations that make photography more enjoyable. And then it's a trade-off. And I get it. The full frame sensors do have some advantages, but they still won't be able to have something like the 300mm lens.
No,
it just isn't possible.
Yeah.
So,
oh yes, and indeed, you know, you look at the lenses, and of course Nikon are in the early days of building out the Z lens system. But you know, everyone goes on about how wonderful the 2470 f4 is, which is the kit lens. But I'll tell you, you go peering in the corners, and the 12 to 40 has got it beaten. I mean, without any shadow of a doubt, and I guess you're just building a lens that's got to fill a frame that's, you know, that's sort of 4 times the area and twice the linear dimensions. And
I find that quite an interesting comment about the corners, because this has always been a weakness of full frame, which people tend to gloss over, because when you have a huge sensor, you really do need a huge lens to cover that sensor. And of course, people don't want huge lenses, so the optical designers have to make them smaller. And your 24 to 70 is not a very wide lens. It doesn't have a very large exit pupil. So it is going to be a compromise in the corners, even though it has a large lens mount. Yeah. Having a lens that's covering a sensor that's 4 times the area of Micro Four Thirds, optically that lens needs to be as big again. So also that lens that you've got on your Z6 is quite long, isn't it? One of the ways of optimizing a lens and keeping it small is to lengthen the optics. And when it comes to the big telephotos and things like that, you can't mess around. They are still going to be big and heavy.
Yes, it's true. Yes. Yeah.
It's a marketing point, though. We sat there when they launched the E1, and the whole telecentric message was the big thing. I'm very proud of the edge-to-edge sharpness. But if you ask a football photographer, he doesn't care, because the bit that he wants sharp is in the middle. And this is where a lot of the, you know, when we talk about tech a lot of the time, sometimes the bit that they really focused on actually isn't that important to a lot of people, because it just so happens that they're interested in the bit in the middle. But the other stuff, some of it really is interesting, and it gets lost because we keep launching new cameras with new things in them, and the competition eventually try to copy things sometimes. So, I mean, the live composite's a great example. The whole idea of a live viewfinder was scoffed at by everybody. And that's largely because EVFs were pretty terrible in the early days, but now they're amazing. So, and most people would admit that using an EVF nowadays has a lot of advantages. I think a lot of that gets lost in the conversations.
Yeah, yeah.
I can remember in the early days of like you, I had a forum member on a different forum who swore blind he would never have a camera that had live view because it would increase the cost of the camera for a feature that he didn't want, and he wouldn't have anything. You know, he wouldn't be persuaded, and he wasn't. Apologies in advance. He wasn't an old fogey. He was a young person with an open mind to an extent, very good photographer. But when it came down to the kit, as you were saying earlier on, you know, people just don't want to change. They don't want to have some newfangled feature imposed on them.
We're all as bad as each other, Ian. I found my father's old flip phone the other day, and I thought I'd like to start using that again because I'm fed up with the big chunky slab of a phone that I've got most of the time. Just let me answer a couple more questions. I noticed some things came up. Somebody said thank you for the videos and everything. It was a big conscious decision to do that. We've got the team. They quite enjoyed doing that in store, so we put them online, and I think they've done something like 400 one-to-one videos now, which is pretty amazing. Future firmware upgrades for the M Mark II, I can't answer that at the moment. Can anyone remember how many firmware upgrades the EM1 Mark II has had?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
Well, we're firmware 3 point something, or is it 4 point something?
3.2, I think.
Are we? Then I'm not 100% sure whether it's due, whether it could get another one or not. So I can't. 4.2. Then it would be speculation, but I would be surprised if there's another one. Let's never say never. Then there's a question about the 100 to 400. Can you say anything about the 100 to 400? It's very good. I've spoken to 2 or 3 of the photographers who've been taking some test images with it, and they think it's amazing. So I think that's a good sign. And I know that it'll be up to you in the end, because the lens it's a specific one. It's a great one for wildlife, because if you put it in the with the stabilization on the M1 series, then it'll be a good match.
Just to be clear on that, the actual question was about the 100 to 400, and not the 150 to 400.
Yes.
Yeah, so you okay? That's good. Yeah, I wasn't clear that you.
Oh no, the there was some slightly tongue-in-cheek comment that why would you buy the 150 to 400 because the 100 to 400 is so good. So.
That was Andy, who's one of our excellent bird photographers, and lives not far from me.
So good news on that. That looks like it's a winner so far. What else have we got?
Okay, can I just say we seem to skip past Robert, who's asking about market share and numbers in Europe. Is that too touchy to talk about?
No, the honest answer is that nobody really gets pure market share figures anymore, because GfK, the company used to do it, asked for so much money, the industry just told them to get stuffed in the end.
Okay. All right. So
it varies country by country.
But the question.
But what he went on to say was, where would you see the increase in sales and profits coming from? What we've demonstrated, and this is an honest evaluation from my perspective, is we were very nervous about the average prices going up in the days of digital when we were selling a lot of compact cameras. But we've proved that high-end kit is attractive, and so that's where the increase in the business is coming from. And the statement I gave to somebody yesterday was, we've actually done more business this first quarter of this financial year, April to June, than we did last year. So, and that's despite all of the chaos going on. So it tends to suggest to me that there's still an appetite for the product. I've
also heard that Olympus is doing really well in Japan at the moment.
Yeah, you've got to be careful looking at all those figures. I know somebody those forums are hilarious on 4 First Rumors when you dig into it. But yes, they've done well. The 10 series and the Pen in Japan is still very popular.
And Pen in Europe is still struggling.
No, it does okay, but it sells to an audience that are not the sort of people going to camera shops or frankly go onto our website. So where it does well is when, bluntly, and it's a topic we all love, bloggers are where it's at, because they're the ones who can talk to people and say, if you want something better than your smartphone, or you see yourself as seeing photography as being a little bit more than a phone, this is a great product. And there was one woman in France, I think about a month ago, who in the space of 2 days sold 2,000 pens just by talking about it. So it's very much a marketing thing. And because the market's been in free fall for the last 3 or 4 years and advertising is difficult nowadays to justify, it's about reaching the right people. But what it does demonstrate is there are still people out there, and the phone generation are still interested in getting into photography, which is a good sign.
Okay, Roger did ask a question about the new Mac Pro. He's asked, do you know how much it's going to cost? You can't answer that, obviously, but is it going to be an affordable lens, or is it going to be a mid-range lens, or is it going to be a high-end lens?
Genuinely can't tell you.
Okay.
I don't know.
Right, okay. But it's a pro lens, isn't it? So, which the 60 macro isn't. So it'll likely be more than that. Okay, let's move on. So Martin, do you want to talk about your question? No. If you
we can talk about what else we got underneath the Andy's one. That was about 100-400. Then AI eye detection of birds and animals. I don't know. Theoretically, it's possible. So let's say, given enough, as you said, machine learning, it could be done. EM1 Mark IV, could it be bigger? The size thing is a never-ending topic, isn't it? Because when they launched EM5, the US market was not so enthusiastic because it was perceived as too small. But in Asia and in Europe, it was very popular. So,
Andy, I'm scrolling up to your question again about the 300 versus the 100-400. Is that something you feel's been covered, or would you like to talk about that a bit further?
We covered that, didn't we, Ian?
Well, it's just that it's been a shame that it's taken so long for Olympus to bring out a long zoom, and now we're going to get two, and you know, basically we can't wait.
Like London buses, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the good news is it won't be too difficult to choose between them, because one's going to be a lot more expensive than the other one.
Yeah. And have you got a time frame for the cheaper one?
No, but it won't be that long. And the other one, again, they've said winter. And I did say I think I said to Nigel yesterday, they don't like putting specific dates on things until everything's completely ticked off, because the last phases of setting up manufacturing and getting everything right are the critical period. So, I mean, they have a roadmap and they have a timeline, but until they are 100% happy, they won't say what the release date is going to be. And that's the same for all manufacturers, because you get the worst thing you can do is say we're going to release it 1 month, then it gets delayed, because that's where you lose credibility.
Okay, right. Quick word to Stephen. He's a new member. Nice to see you, Stephen. Welcome. We're going to move on. Right, so we've gone past. Actually, Stephen asked a question.
Question about repairs.
Oh yes, I've actually put a camera in for repair in the last week, and I haven't received my shipping stuff. So I've got to chase them up.
They the Czech guys have had a few problems because some problems with. I mean, the lockdown was managed in different ways by different places, and actually Portugal carried on more than I thought they would. I thought they'd shut the whole repair place down. The customer service had a few problems with phone calls, so they're only doing it by email, and they're all scattered around. So, and normally they're in an office where everything's working. So there've been a few glitches, but actually it hasn't been nearly as glitchy as I thought it might be, and that will slowly get back to normal. In terms, somebody asked about Brexit. That's the same as everything else. we'll deal with it the way everyone else deals with it, but it won't, you know, there are statutory rules in place about supporting product, so don't worry about that.
Okay. So moving on then, Gary Dowsell. This is all about service and warranties again.
Again, that's it would be speculation to say anything too dramatic, but that's an integral part of what the brand's all about, and that's what my friend Pedro in Hamburg really put a lot of effort into 4 or 5 years ago to bring it up to where it is, and we don't expect that to change.
So lots of positive comments about Olympus service, and scrolling through.
So yeah, warranties are okay.
So James, would be very interested to know how many here today use the Olympus camera for video as much as the stills. What's your view on that? Nigel Afton was a bit scathing of Olympus's slowness to get into video, and I think there may have been some politics behind that, because obviously your relationship with Panasonic is a tricky subject, isn't it?
Well, no, it's more basic than that. Video is very specific, and you know, because you've been around the products long enough.
Now.
But you need people who are experienced in video. Panasonic had an R&D department. That's what they did, and ours were all doing still image processing, and they're different. And whatever conversations went on in the background, who knows? Maybe they said this is a good way of divvying things up. But in practice, you can't just have. You need a lot of people to make that stuff work. And it was a conscious decision to focus on the still side, but they also knew that the image stabilization brought some benefits that other people couldn't deliver. So there are lots of people using it for video, and they just don't get too hung up on the fact that it doesn't have every single format on there.
And I can answer that question. I use my camera for video quite a lot, so especially in 4K. Okay. Right, moving on, firmware. Oh,
any plans to put the Betacam software on Mac? Don't know.
Sorry, in there, any chance of a quick of hands for video? Because I don't use it at all, so would be very unhappy, if you like, to lose a camera because it wasn't becoming a superstar in the video arena. No.
Oh, sorry, James. Your sound, at least at my end, is a bit garbled. But
yeah, my headset's a bit dodgy.
Well,
it could be me.
You have an extra point to make. Yes.
Who actually uses it? Show of hands, if you may.
Oh yes. Okay. I think it may be more than you might expect.
Not sure what to expect, but I wouldn't want to lose a camera because it was not a superstar in the video arena, but was great in stills.
Oh, and I think they've made enough changes, because by putting the log function on there and by bringing in some of the frame rates that people were asking for, because in the early days they really didn't get it. I think that's fair to say, when it was stuck at 30 frames a second. And if you don't know video and you want to shoot stuff for broadcast, it makes it more complicated. So they've addressed that. It's simply that it's not top of their list.
Okay.
Understood. Yeah, thanks, Mark. It just seems to be de rigueur that everybody needs to be a superstar in video as well as stills if they're going to succeed in the marketplace.
It's an interesting point, but I think the market reality is that you've got to have video, isn't it? So
it would seem.
That's a couple of others. So webcam software, I really don't know about Mac. Mac's notoriously more difficult, but in terms of dealing with Apple, but if it's enough demand for it, they might do it. Have we? Where are we? You were scrolling.
David was asking about how heavy the 150-400 is.
I can't remember. The mock-up we had at TPS wasn't a full production lens, so I can't give you an actual answer to that because I'd be speculating. Okay. But somebody said, is the 100-400 weather seal, for example? I can't answer that right now because that's the classic thing where I get into trouble.
Okay. And you get into trouble all the time, don't you?
Well, if you say something, because this is a unique circumstance to be doing this, and with the product release at some point, so all of that will come out and nothing's changed. We still don't like to talk about things before they officially get released.
Okay, Jeremy's got a question about pro service.
Mm-hmm.
Asking whether, well, Jeremy, you want to ask a question?
Yes, and this was a couple of years ago. I had to put in my 10 to 40 Pro to have it repaired. The zoom ring had frozen in place. But then they came out with the Pro service plan, and I looked at it and found actually I wasn't eligible because I didn't have a Pro camera. So I couldn't have my Pro lenses serviced under the Pro plan. And I wonder if there's any chance of getting this changed, because obviously people will have Pro lenses in an EM5 because we want the small form factor camera. Yet we're denied a very useful piece of service.
Well, at the moment, that's probably a difficult question to answer, because we're in the middle of, this is a period of obviously uncertainty, and I don't think there'll be any hard and fast, but I can ask.
Yeah, it was really something to push up the chain, because I'm willing to pay what the price is, and get the service, and I feel I'm being denied.
And actually, I'm sure they'd be delighted to sell you the service, because it's a good service, and I think they tried to position it with the M1 series for particular reasons, but yes, why not? I'll ask for you.
Thank you. I'm afraid I may have to drop the connection just for a minute and switch to another laptop if someone else wants mine. So a few minutes.
See you in a minute then. Okay. I like John. Sorry, I'm going to try and pronounce your surname. Kurganvan?
John Kurganvan.
Oh, right. Well, this is your mate, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I like the fact that he's thanking us, but I like his comment about he's only been an Olympus user since 1976. So
that beats me.
Doesn't beat me. My first Olympus was one of the little compacts, an RD or an RC, I can't remember, when I was at school in 1975, I think. So there you go.
Lots of comments about workspace. Let's not talk about that. Software's not our thing.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, Ian. It's John Kagenvan. 100%. Well done. Congratulations. Hi, Mark. Thanks to both of you for putting this on. It's been well worth it. Much appreciated. And all I will say is to the entire Olympus team, these latest Facebook sessions and so on are marvelous. Please keep them going. I think they're as good for marketing as they are for current Olympus users. I appreciate all you're doing and wish you all the best in maintaining positive for the future. Take care.
Very much. Thanks, John.
That's very nice. What's the background behind John? I know you've known him for a while. Are you a photographer or somebody famous that we don't know about?
I don't know. I think there are too many people know about me already. I wouldn't want to go down that route.
John's son worked with us for a while.
Oh, okay.
Amongst other connections.
Right. Okay. Moving on then. Does Mark know if the webcam software again? We've covered the bird focusing. Pros and cons of using. Okay. Do you want to talk about that? About pros and cons between 100, 400 Olympus and Panasonic versions?
Where's that one?
It's from Joe Dale.
What does it actually say? Save me trying to find it.
Joe, do you want to ask your question? Are you there, Joe? Joe might have gone.
Sorry, I was away from my screen.
There you go. By the way, Joe, let me just quickly introduce Joe. Like David, Joe is one of our serial safari people all over the world. I'm so jealous that you would not believe it. Anyway, back to you, Joe.
Yeah, so I currently use an EM1 Mark II with the Panasonic 100 to 400 pretty much married to it nearly all the time. So the fact that Olympus are finally releasing their own version of that lens has me sort of interested, but I've already got the Panasonic, so what do I need the Olympus one for? Just wondered what your thoughts were in terms of the pros and cons. I mean, obviously you've got the dual IS and the Pro Capture being fully operational, which it isn't on the Panasonic. Weather sealing would be another big one for me, because a lot of the places I go to tend to be rather wet at times, and the Panasonic does quite well in those sort of conditions. So yeah, basically just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Sadly, for the usual boring reasons, I can't really say much, because as soon as we start talking about specifics, everyone gets very jumpy. So the throwaway bit that some people have used it and the images are good, I mean, I would say that, but that's genuinely, the feedback's been extremely good. Other than that, you'll have to wait a little while until we can answer those questions, I'm afraid. But we'll come back on when it's launched, Ian, and we can argue the toss about it all.
Just one quick mention of the Panasonic 100-400. A few of our members have had problems actually mounting that lens to their cameras. They've had lens mount issues, not isolated cases. So that would hopefully be a problem that would go away with the Olympus version. Okay,
yeah, one would hope so. Yes, that would be pretty bad.
So has the new back to Jeremy again. He's asking about the new factory. This is the Vietnam factory, I presume. Has the new factory helped in planning the release cycle for new products?
It's probably too early to tell. I think everyone, it wasn't a big secret that it took a little bit longer than they'd hoped to do this. So I can't really tell you on that.
Okay. Okay, more praise for service from Stephen. Roger, I've always found more service praise. The workspace, we can't talk about that at the moment.
Website going around in circles. If you drop me an email, I can ask somebody about that. But for some bizarre reason, some people have trouble with the registration. Other people have no problems, and some people do. I don't know if it's a browser thing or what, but ping me an email, ping Ian an email, and we'll address it.
Okay, so somebody here wants a Mark II Pen F, but you can't talk about that.
No, well, that's one of the classic ones, because there were occasional interviews where they said no, and then yes, then no, then yes, then no. So okay, I'd like one too, because I think if you look at the range now, it seems to me that it would be better to have a rangefinder style alternative, simply because some people like them. And rather than trying to worry about all the different models having different levels of specification, but they're not cheap to develop. So let's see. Okay,
so there's one here about extended warranty from John.
That's the one we were talking about.
Oh right, yes, okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind. So I've come to the end of the questions, I think, here. Does anybody have something they'd like to say, or have we come to a natural conclusion? Want to say anything, you need to unmute. Yes, so I can hear somebody.
Yeah, it's Paul here, and I'm sorry, I joined a bit late because I was struggling with the Zoom stuff, so I'm not sure if Mark was able to say anything about the JIP position or anything. I mean, if only just some view of what's likely to happen over the next weeks, months, and so on. I mean, at what point do you think there'll be some clarity about what the future position is going to be?
It's really hard to say. We said at the beginning, basically the release they put out said everything that we know. And that's because whatever conversations they've had behind closed doors, they have to say, when this is all stock market regulations, business stuff, they have to say there's something happening. Yeah. But then between now and the end of September, there's a lot of discussion and due diligence that goes on. And at that point, perhaps there'll be more clarity, but that's me speculating. But I think, we've said pretty firmly that it's important that there's a bit more clarity and some sort of idea of what the plans are, because people want to know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that, and I'm sure this is stating the obvious really, but I think the making sure the positive messaging and so on goes out is probably really important, because it did seem a little strange that, you know, one week we had this, you know, announcement about the JIP thing, and it sent really everyone into a tailspin. And then a week later, we're getting new product announcements. You know, it seems a bit strange looked at it like that, and I can sort of see how it might have happened. But I guess the emphasis needs to be on, you know, sort of reassuring people and giving them a, you know, a view of where things are and what's happening next.
It does, and like everything else, it's easy to have a bunch of different viewpoints and conspiracy theories, and looking at what JP had done in the past, and it's all speculation. So we're confident about it, because we think there are some downsides to being a small part of a big company, because the focus is very much on the medical, which is a very, very different business.
Yeah.
And whilst there are some shared technology aspects, the actual business selling to public sector and healthcare is polar opposite to selling a consumer product.
Is there anything in the kind of feedback you've sensed from people's reaction to the news which you feel has been off the mark? Is there anything that you think, is there any emphasis which you think you can bring which perhaps might correct some people's first conceptions of the news? Well,
no, because in the end, at the moment we're very much still. Oh, there's Lewis. I'll let him in. Hang on, it's one of our lads. Okay. Hey, Lewis. The situation is pure speculation,
right?
Because until somebody makes more specifics, comments, it's all open ended. But all we can say is we've seen where the products have gone. We've seen the reaction to them. We've seen the increase in the business in the last couple of years at the enthusiast level. We see where the market is going, because it has been a bloodbath, bluntly, for 5 years for all the camera companies, struggling to deal with declining sales, because you have an operation built up. The repair facilities being a good example. They were built up to handle 100,000 cameras a month or something ridiculous, and then suddenly they're not. So there's an awful lot of changes, but there is stability looking like being there. So all we can say is we feel internally that it's in a good position, and perhaps with a new impetus behind it, it'll get even better.
Quick question from Geraldine about, will the 100 already come out before the 150-400?
Can't answer that officially.
But I think you hinted that 100-400 is not that far away.
It can't be.
Okay, all right. Have you seen any internal? I don't think you can really answer that, can you? Internal changes since the announcement?
No.
No. Okay. No. One person that may not be here did ask me to ask about Olympus visionaries and ambassadors. Are their positions secure for the time being?
Absolutely. They're a core part of what we do. And it's a bit of a poison subject for all the manufacturers, because there are lots and lots of good people, and we'd like to use more, but there are limits, because there's no point in having hundreds. And this happened in Germany a few years ago. They realized they needed more people out there talking about the product, and they raced around getting something like 100 ambassadors, but then you run into the trouble of you can't give them all things to do. So it's but we're going, the ones we've got are very good, so we have no plans to change that.
And talking of ambassadors, we have got Gavin Hoey coming next Saturday.
Good.
So that's signed and sealed. I haven't announced it yet, but Gavin is coming next Saturday.
And I know you weren't specifically planning this, but Gavin does shoot a lot of video, and he can talk about that. It's not his core thing, but he does some.
Yeah, I think he's looking forward to talking about photography from his own perspective, not just the Olympus perspective. So he needed a bit of time to put something together. Okay, so it's we've done the hour. There are a few questions here which I think are fairly generic.
Reactions from Adobe. That's far too early.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, last chance. Does anyone want to speak up and ask a quick question? Or
yes, please, Ian.
Hello, Jeremy. What a surprise.
Yes. I did actually put it in the chat. I don't know if you remember, Mark, in fact, I think it was 2 years ago at the NEC, people were talking about their love for the EM5 form factor.
Yes.
And what they wanted in their hands was a portable EM1.
Yes.
And they recognised that they had to sacrifice certain things for that comfort. So only one SD slot, a slightly smaller battery.
Yeah.
But since then, the EM5 II was looking very positive. But with the EM5 III and also the EM10 III, there seems to be this slight strategy that it's not quite keeping pace and they're dropping things, probably to differentiate the cameras in the marketplace. But does that mean we are not going to get a nice portable EM1? Or, because some people just don't want that hand grip.
They don't. I think, unfortunately, you're a victim of, to some extent, of the way the market's gone. Because, again, it comes down to production quantities. And this was what killed off the stylus, which was, I thought, it wasn't a perfect camera, the stylus one, but a lot of people loved it.
Excellent.
But when it came to, they thought, you know, we're going to do a second one, they said, well, if you forecast 30,000 units around the world, it's going to cost £1,000. If we can make 60,000, it costs half that. And so it's partly a supply and demand issue. And you're right about trying to differentiate the products. That's a natural thing to do because there is some confusion otherwise. It's not an easy thing to do when you're sharing sensors particularly. But that's one of the reasons I think that having a rangefinder camera is a good thing. But that only makes sense if there's enough. And actually, of the Pen F, they sold twice as many as they thought they were going to, which wasn't widely known, but they had quite a conservative target, and it did a lot better. But this time round, the market's now 3 years later and has shrunk quite a lot. So it's a difficult balance. You could have whatever you want if you are prepared to pay for it.
Well, in some senses, I'm prepared to pay a bit more. And the 5 III has great things going for it. You know, they've made it lighter. Fantastic. Yeah. That's what people wanted. But in my particular case, they've taken out the tether option.
Yeah.
You know, what's going on?
Well, I think the tether. I mean, yes, you're right. But the tether thing, I don't know. It is in the end differentiating.
Yeah. The battery change, but you can live with that because you can purchase the slightly physically smaller batteries further down the range. Although I think a lot of people would have liked to have kept the 5.1 and 5.2 batteries. So, you know, some things you can work around, but you know, some things you just can't. That makes it a difficult choice. You know, I want to upgrade, but do I go for the Mark II or do I go for the Mark III?
Yeah. I mean, in the end, I can't advise you on that.
Oh no, obviously, but you know,
the only thing I would say is
would have been obvious.
Mark is able to feed back opinion to Japan. Whether they can do anything, that's another matter. But Mark does that quite a lot, I think. He speaks.
Oh yeah, we feed it back all the time. But I mean, there's a limit to what they can do.
Yeah.
And that's always been the case.
Yeah, it's just that taking things out seems very negative, and you will upset those who wish to carry on with the latest versions of what they've got rather than move up to a new product line.
I understand, and that's always been an issue. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that we've come to an end. Just a quick hands up. Who's using their camera, their OMD as a webcam today? I am. Ta-da. So, oh no, James, what's the matter with you?
It's a Mac.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mac users.
No real reason. Look forward to giving it a try, but when the Mac version gets stable, because I canned all that rubbish Windows stuff a couple of years ago, and I've no desire to go back.
Well, I have to say, I'm rather impressed because I'm using an EM1, not a Mark II, and the battery has been going now for about an hour and 20 minutes. So that's quite impressive. So, because I had it going well before we started. So very promising. I'm very impressed.
Not really interested till I can get it into my TikTok feed.
Very good.
Why doesn't it support the camera sound? Is that a technical problem, or?
Do you know, I have no idea about that, but maybe it's an opportunity for us to sell more of the little LS recorders, because they'll do a good job.
Yeah, well, cheaper to buy a webcam, of course.
I saw there's a couple more questions. Someone asked about the TUFs. Well, they're putting a 20 million pixel in a TUF. Funny enough, one of our one of our colleagues in Scandinavia said, "Can we have a micro four thirds TUF camera?" And the trouble is, it would be about this big, so it's not really very practical. Is there going to be another TUF? I imagine so, but I can't tell you at the moment. What else have we got on there? Older versions of OIS of it. Oh, right.
Oh, love the fact there's going to be another version of TUF. The High Commander will be absolutely incredibly pleased.
I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing because it's a successful product, so I would imagine there'll be another one.
And would appear to avoid most of the pits and at the moment.
I have got a spare headset at home here, actually, that I found today.
Right. It's a recent problem. It's just occurred this last week. I haven't bottomed it out yet.
You sound like a Dalek.
Yeah.
Okay. Question. There's a comment about the. Is there any heat problem with the OMD webcam? And well, mine's working fine, and it's the older model, which I presume is less heat efficient than the new one. So.
Ask something.
Yep.
Yeah. Is the repair facility in Portugal still safe?
As far as I know, yeah. We've heard nothing to the contrary.
My understanding is that if you leave your item for a couple of days, that effectively sterilizes it from the virus.
Oh, you talk about that, yeah. I think it was mean more safe in general.
Yeah, safe in. I meant I've got an extended warranty, and obviously that's the problem if it fails.
No, I mean this is what I want to reassure everybody. There's legislation to cover all that. We can't just shut up shop and cancel all of that. So it's that's all fine. And we should do this again in about 4 or 5 weeks, because maybe we'll have some more news on some of the products by then. Okay, that would be fantastic. So I think I'll draw a line there. Thank you everyone, and thank you, Mark, for being with us. And we'll take you up on that promise to come back. Well, let's when we know for sure when we'll have some more news, then we can set another day. Okay, and I'm sure you'll be able to help me booking some more Olympus visionaries to come and talk to us, hopefully. Yeah. And as I said, we've got Gavin Hoey this time next week, same slot, 2 o'clock. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Mark.
See you soon. Bye. Bye.